Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Rhea, and today I will be talking about the topic of housing crisis in Northern Territory, along with my group, whose names are on the top right corner. Um, specifically, we chose this topic because it is an ongoing crisis, and therefore we could find a lot of research material that was available online. And it is also covered by the ABC, the Guardians, and the Four Corners. For this topic, we have chosen to focus on the Vadai community, which is one of the Northern Territory's largest indigenous community. Their major issues are around overcrowding and serious housing shortages, which is a significant program directed by the government. And a little about the Vadai community. So its location is approximately 420 kilometers southwest to the Darwin. They are a home to roughly 2,500 to 3,000 residents, which comprises of people from seven language groups and over 20 distinct clans. Their traditional land is Kardu Daminin, and a little bit about the historical background is they were originally known as the Port Kates, Portkeats, and their township established as a Roman Catholic mission in 1935, but they were renamed as Vadai in 1978 after an administrative control that was passed to the local council. So these are the topics that we have covered in our presentation. So, what exactly is happening is the housing crisis in the community is an ongoing emergency which involves overcrowding, severe overcrowding, inadequate and aging houses, which has a severe effect on health, safety, education, employment, and community well being. In certain reports, this community have held as many as 26 people, and the community has been described as one of the most disadvantaged in Australia in terms of housing. What is this emergency? The emergency is simply not just about having not enough houses, but a wider issue of insufficient shelters, which may cause issues to health and affects the dignity of the people living in that community. Limited infrastructure makes daily life unsafe and unstable and restricts access to normal community life. How it developed? Vadai's crisis has developed over many years through insufficient funds, population pressure, remotedness, and housing systems that have failed to keep up with the community needs. The repeated need for involvement suggests a structural problem, not just a short term shortage. And why it matters? The Vadai housing crisis is a crucial emergency because it affects both shelter and the conditions needed to live an everyday life. It has a serious consequence that affects local employment, training, service, delivery, and stability of a wider community. So, in all, the Vadai community illustrates how housing can become an emergency when it is an intersection of colonial history, remote geography, and infrastructure failure and an unequal access of public services.
Hello, my name is Prekshika, and I'm going to talk about the theories, methods, frameworks, and precedents part of this presentation. Good design isn't neutral, it's a cultural judgment. Mehmet and Keyes argue that Western architecture has been treated as the standard default when really it's just one tradition out of many. They give us three things that every design decision should be checked against. First, authority. Right now, design authority lies entirely with government departments and outside contractors. It should sit with the inhabitants' kinship and skin group structures. Second, spatial behavior. A four-bedroom nuclear family house doesn't fit seven language groups and 20 plus clans. Third, encoded meaning. A house can be structurally complete and still feel empty. Next, I'm using Burgle's holistic framework to change how we talk about overcrowding and what truly makes it an emergency. With this study, they found that housing that's wrong for climate and culture directly causes overcrowding, and overcrowding causes a chain reaction. Chronic diseases, depression, conflict, poor school attendance. All of this in turn leads to the collapse of the cultural strength and resilience of the community. Turning these theories into a practical method, let's have a look at the AERC cultural design paradigm. This paradigm says observe before you design. So, night versus day, wet and dry, hot and cold, gendered use of space, leading to a decentralized, adaptable housing instead of a fixed box with a roof. However, there is a limitation here. This kind of deep, slow observational study takes a lot of time, which one might not have in the case of an emergency. It also forces us to ask that does simply observing actually give real design authority? Here, I have looked at the AHURI 6-point design framework. In most projects, community consultation is treated as a box to tick at the beginning and then completely forgotten. This model changes that by demanding that consultation reoccurs at every single step of the design, construction, and management. Despite this knowledge, though, here is what really happened. This framework has been public government research since 2008. In the same decade, there was a rollout of a major top-down housing program, and it proved that great framework on paper guarantees nothing. In some cases, the barrier isn't the lack of knowledge, but the lack of the political will to implement it. Connecting with Country is an NSW government architect framework, shifting from human centered to country centered design. It legally requires built environment projects to be actively guided by indigenous people, completely moving past basic consultation. To understand what happens when we ignore these theories, methods, and frameworks, there I will discuss this precedent. A massive failed government program, NPARIH and SIHIP. If we test them against the previously mentioned frameworks, they failed on every front. First, authority failed because all design decisions stayed with the government departments. Second, process failed because consultation, if any, was a single early stage formality. And third, observation failed because they built rigid standardized suburban homes with zero regard for seasonal changes, kinship structures, and gendered spaces. On the flip side, a brilliant positive precedent is Vilaya Janta out of Tennant Creek. This initiative was started directly by the Varumungu elders to fight back amongst these exact failed government models. To this, though, there is a scale limitation. Vilaya Janta works within a smaller, more contained community structure, whereas Vadaye population of 2,600 across 7 language groups and 20 clans is far more complex. Looking at the 2026 data by Quilty, the spatial layout here shows us exactly how architecture acts as a preventative medicine. Look at the comparison on the screen. The standard government house is a tight and closed rigid structure with a tiny veranda. On the right, the Vilaya Janta Explain home completely reverses that, giving residents a massive central breeze with outdoor living zone. It embeds specific cultural requirements. Bedheads face east for proper sleeping orientation. The fire pits sit to the east, so smoke ceremonially flows through the living areas, and it uses local termite mound clay bricks for brilliant thermal insulation. To wrap up, I want to emphasize that architectural design is not the only problem or solution. This is an example in graphic and communication design. Bundy, a housing tool for mob created by the George Institute. This tool targets a hidden systematic part of any housing crisis, legibility. A house can be perfectly built, but if the repair and appeal system around it completely unreadable to the tenant, the architecture still fails. If someone can't navigate the pipeline to report a fault, the infrastructure breaks down. Our final response strategy must address all design requirements as well as consider limitations. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I am Deniz, and today I will be covering site analysis that basically will contain what I actually looks like on the ground, what conditions people are dealing day to day, and what kind of dangers and that site presents. And after all that, we can clearly understand that why you cannot just put a standard housing design onto this place and expect it to work. So let's get started with the location and population. So as Rhea mentioned that it was formerly known as Port Keats, sits right on the Dahlia River coast in the top end of the Northern Territory. The closest city is Durban, which is 400 kilometers away. For population, there is not a fixed number, but it's somewhere between 2,500 to 3,000 people. And it sometimes grows during the wet seasons because outstations around Wet-Eye get cut off by flooding and people move into the town and waited to get out again. And also for outsiders, needs permits from Northern Land Council to visit or work there. And Getting there is quite challenging. There is only two-way access. One of them is by air, and the other one is by single unsealed road that takes about 6 hours from Darwin. And the thing is, the road only works during the dry season because it's closed by the floods. And also the airstrip is really the only year-round option. It's just a 45-minute flight. And it's also worth mentioning that the scale of investment this isolation is forcing. The 2025 Northern Territory budget actually put aside $90 million specifically to upgrade that road, and which tells us that government itself sees isolation as a structural problem. It's not an inconvenience. For the climates, there are normally 4 seasons, but Veda has two. One of them is wet and the other is dry. So wet season is runs November to April. Monsoon rains, humidity that regularly sits about 80%. There is a cyclone risk, and also road goes underwater. Dry season, there are clearer skies, lower humidity, and also the average daily temperature is around 32 degrees. But the dry season heat is getting more extreme due to climate change. And if you look at the climate change effect, the projection shows a number of days above 35 degrees, roughly doubling by mid-century, going from around 176 days a year to 288. And also, which is a place that has a housing problem. Homes are overcrowded with no ceiling fans, no insulation, no aerial airflow. That kind of heat doesn't just pass through your house, it gets trapped inside it. And there have been reports that people paying rent on homes don't even have doors or windows, and some families are generally choosing between running cooler and having enough money for food. Every one of those homes becomes a bit more dangerous each passing year, and also especially for the elder people who has chronic illness, which depends on temperature. And for the services, Veda is not lacking everything. They have supermarket that restocks fresh food, also weekly deliveries available. There are clinic, post office, police station, well-being centers, pool, and library. Visitors can also stay in the centers as well. So the basic infrastructure of the town exists. And for the land itself, Veda sits at just 11 meters above sea level, close to Daly and Fitzmaurice rivers. And it's actually the original settlement was founded right on the coast back in 1938, then moved 14 kilometers inland because that the first site wouldn't guarantee a reliable water supply. And more broadly, the whole region is a part of low-lying floodplain typical of the top end coast. And when land is this flat and this low, water doesn't really have anywhere to go. Ponding and logging become the default states in the wet season unless something is actively done to stop it. And for the potential dangers, there are four main ones that I will want to talk about. The first one is a cyclone. So radar sits inside cyclone-prone band that runs across the whole north of Australia. The savanna woodland is naturally fire adapted with fuel building up through the dry season. Also for wildlife, the rivers nearby crocodile habitats, and also there are some buffalo and pigs around, which can create risk for people safety and also infrastructure also. The most important one is the human violence. I would like to give an example. So in April 22, there's a conflict broke between clans, which contains 22 different family groups, and it escalated to the point where 37 homes were damaged by arson and 125 of the town's 288 properties needed repairs. This wasn't a random violence, as I said, it's came out of the tension between the rival clan groups. So, as a designer, I would like to wrap up with the design responses. So for flooding risk, raising floor levels above expected wet season water table is fairly direct fix alongside permeable ground surface and soils that guide water away from building instead of letting it pool. For wildlife, we can create like some type of signs and put them into their habitats. For cyclone, there should be cyclone where the structure should be at the baseline in there. And for access, Construction really has to be planned around dry season and on-site. Water and power storage will help bridge that gap when the roads cuts off. And for the bushfire, keeping clear buffer zones between housing and semi-edge matters. There's a strong case for actually supporting indigenous-led culture burning rather than bringing in some unfamiliar fire management system from outside. And the most important one is the social conflicts. And moving toward clan-based planning instead of centralized housing seems like a real option. And there is an example is the which is the Mantatpi subdivision, where housing was grouped by kinship rather than just a convenience and the length of economics.
All right, so now I'm going to talk about the inhabitant analysis. So first of all, we're going to talk about the Wade. So who is the Wade? Wade is the one of the largest Aboriginal town in Northern Territory. And according to the research, they also refer to as Port Keat, and their population is approximately more than 2,000 people. They mainly speak Marine Pata language, and they have a very complex cultures. And they have also they belong to the Tama regions, home to several tribal groups, language groups, and over 20 clans with different custom, different uh, community, and different land. They have custom like ceremonial dance period festival and inheriting land and totem. Their education has been provided by the Catholic Church and is associated with Catholic educations because of in the past they have been associated with Catholic because of the missions. What their politics is a complex community. They've been known for being very violent on many levels and having high rates of involvement in crime and having gang associations. So now I'm going to talk about the housing crisis impact. So as for health impact, there's nearly half of the world their populations that claim they got many diseases through the roof and quote the housing minister, Jerry McCarthy. Healthier living and reducing serious chronic illness like rheumatic heart disease relate to improving housing. And to make this more clear, so according to Dr. Todi, the lack of facility like refrigerator make the living in the area of high heat stress, like in the Northern Territory, exacerbate the morbidity and the mortality rate of the indigenous. So as for political impact, there have been an article in 2005 by the Australian government said that they up to 9.5 million have been used to help ease the one-day housing crisis in 2005. So this is a very serious crisis in the community that happened for a while until now. And quote the Minister of the Family and Community Service, Senator Kay Patterson, he said that what they have been identified as priority due to high level of overcrowding. And because of a substantial proportion of houses are old and in very bad conditions as well. So they really need something to improve this housing crisis. And if we could do something about it, it could be the foundations of the economy of what like the project of the Mr. McCarthy that we mentioned up here. So now I'm going to talk about the social impact. So there were at least 57 out of 400 houses in the town that is seriously overcrowded. And for a town with more than 2,000 people living in it, it's a very serious problem. And because of this, people tend to move out of their house because some family start a fight with them, or and this have make them always to live in fear. Also, there's some families have to sleep in the living room just because they fear they will get robbed in overnight. And because of this, they are unable to have a good night's sleep, making it difficult for daily life activities. So coming up with the emerging issues, uh, the working lifespan is shorter than average. Children suffering abuse and neglect. Serious crime rates are extremely high now, up to 7 times for murder and 34 times for domestic violence, which is very serious. And last but not least, to quoting the data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics in 2021, there are up to 92 multiple families household, and 52 of them those consist of a lot of couple families and children. And because of this, domestic violence crime rate and number of children suffering abuse and neglect have been increased over the time. Thank you very much. And here, this is the reference.